1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 8. Charity never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. Some preachers have tried to use this verse to suggest that tongues has already ceased. And they use this word here for cease because it's a different Greek word than the Greek word that's used to describe prophecies and knowledge ceasing. Prophecies and knowledge have the same Greek word. Prophecies shall fail is the Greek word 2673 in the Strong's. And for knowledge vanishing away is also 2673 in the Strong's, meaning they're the same word. But for tongues, it's a different Greek word, 3973. And some preachers have tried to say that this Greek word, 3973, means that tongues will cease differently, that it will cease all by itself. It will cease itself, and it will cease itself all by itself without any external help or influences. But we have this word in other places in the Bible. Here, where Jesus rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased. This word here for ceased is the same 3973. But did the water cease itself all by itself without any external influences? Of course not. Because Jesus was rebuking it. And Jesus' rebuke would be an external influence. Perhaps the water did obey Jesus, and you could say that it therefore ceased itself, but certainly not all by itself, and certainly not without a reason. So tongues could possibly cease itself, but not necessarily without a reason. So let's see, why and when does tongues cease? Well, tongues and prophecy and knowledge are all similar in that they are all partial. They all involve a lack of knowledge. Prophecy would not be necessary if you had all knowledge. If everyone knew everything, everyone knew the future, and everyone knew everything else, you would not need prophecy. Prophecy requires an environment of lack in the area of knowledge. Same thing goes for tongues. If you knew what you were saying, it wouldn't be unknown tongues. Paul said, when I speak in unknown tongue, my spirit prays, but my understanding is unfruitful. Therefore, tongues is also partial in that it is a lack of knowledge. And knowledge, all of our knowledge, is partial because we don't know everything. So these three are similar, they are partial. Therefore, if they were to cease, it could be because that partial thing, our lack of knowledge, will one day be gone. So let's read on and see. When will these three cease? He says, for we know in part, and we prophesy in part. When he says we know in part, that would refer to both tongues and knowledge, both of which are lack of knowledge. We know in part. We don't know what we say when we speak in tongues, and we don't know everything. So we know in part. and we prophesy in part. This deals with the prophecy, which is the one of the three that will pass away. But when that which is perfect is come, some preachers have tried to say that this perfect is the Bible, or the canonization of the Scripture. But that's not the perfect, and we will see later what is the perfect. But we read, when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. Notice this word then. We're going to see some more thens. And all of these thens are referring to this time when the perfect has come, when that which is in part shall be done away. So let's look for some more thens, and we'll get a better understanding of when and what this perfect is. Let's continue. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. This would refer to the current state that we are in now. But when, or then, but let's read. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. This refers to that perfect time. But let's continue. For now we see through a glass darkly. But then, another then, face to face. Now I know in part. But then, another then, shall I know even as also I am known. So here we have in this scripture several thens. But then, face to face. What is then? Why does he use the word then? It's an incomplete thought unless you explain what then is. That then is the same as this then, up earlier. Then that which is in part shall be done away. These thens are referring to the same time, the same period, the same event. It is when that perfect shall come. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then, face to face. So this scripture gives us a clear answer to when that perfect will come. It is when we will see him face to face. Also, it says, now I know in part, but then shall I know even as I am known. So not only will it be when we see him face to face, but also at that time we will have great knowledge, so much so that we will know even as we are known. But what will we see, and when will we see God's face? We have that answer in Revelation 22:4, where it says, and they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. This scripture, Revelation 22:4, occurs after God created the new heavens and the new earth. In fact, this scripture is nearly at the end of the Bible. So it will be after everything else has occurred. And one of the last things that God does is he creates a new heavens and a new earth. That new heaven and that new earth is the perfect that will one day come. And then they shall see his face. Only when that perfect comes. Which is what Paul says here. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. And more than just seeing his face, we will also have great knowledge. And we will know even as we are known. And with that great knowledge, many things that involve a lack of knowledge will vanish away, including these three things that he mentioned here. Prophecies will not be necessary in the new heavens and the new earth, because we will know even as we are known. Tongues also will simply cease, because we will know what we're saying. It won't be tongues anymore. It'll be a language, a heavenly language. And our knowledge also will be gone, because in Isaiah 65:17 he says, "For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered, nor come into mind." So when God makes the new heavens and the new earth, knowledge, it shall vanish away. The former shall not be remembered, nor come into mind. So we will not remember this old life that we're living right now. Why not? Well, it doesn't say. But probably because our memory is tainted with sin. We have the memory and the knowledge of this life that we now live, and all of its failures and all of its pain and all of the sorrow and all of the sin. And God does not want that tainted memory to contaminate the new heavens and the new earth. He wants it to be perfect, that perfect which will then come. And so to protect it, I believe, he will cause the old to be forgotten. It will not be remembered. It will not come into mind. So we will have a new knowledge, and we will know even as we are known. Yet, the old knowledge, the knowledge we now have, it shall vanish away. When will it vanish away? Then, that which is in part shall be done away. When is that then? But then, face to face. And then, when we know even as we are known. So preachers who try to say that the perfect is the Bible or the canonization of the Scripture, well, that's just not true. It would be more like the new heavens and the new earth, not the Bible. But there's more scriptures in this passage which some use to say that tongues has already ceased. When we go to the previous chapter, chapter 12, at the end of the chapter, Paul said in 12:31, "But covet earnestly the best gifts, and yet show I unto you a more excellent way." Now some have said that the more excellent way follows in the next chapter, which would be chapter 13, which is the love chapter. Therefore some have said that Paul was suggesting in this scripture, after he said, "Covet earnestly the best gifts, and yet show I unto you a more excellent way. Some have said that Paul was saying that the more excellent way is love, and therefore we don't need any of the gifts of the Spirit, because love is a more excellent way. But Paul did not say that love was a replacement for the gifts, but that the gifts with love are a more excellent way. But some don't believe that. They believe the more excellent way is that Paul was suggesting in this love chapter, chapter 13, that love is a replacement. But if that were so, then why is it that in chapter 14, he then begins, after having talked about love, he then concludes by saying, follow after charity or love, and desire spiritual gifts. Now, if he was to suggest that love replaces the gifts, then this would not be a very good conclusion to such a statement. But then, at the end of chapter 14, he then concludes by saying, wherefore, or in other words, to summarize everything he said, wherefore, brethren, covet to prophesy, and forbid not to speak with tongues. Now, if Paul was suggesting that love was the more excellent way in chapter 13, then why would he then follow that up and conclude all of that in chapter 14 by saying, covet to prophesy, and forbid not to speak with tongues? So, the more excellent way was not that love replaces the gifts, but right here, follow after love and desire spiritual gifts. In other words, don't follow after gifts and desire love, but let love be in front of you. Follow after love, not after the gifts, but still desire the gifts because they are still important. And the gifts, including prophecy and tongues, they will pass away when the new heavens and the new earth come. Credit is given to eSword for the scripture references. Thanks for watching.